Silliman University, a prime Christian school where education builds competence, character, and faith in an environment of serenity, inclusivity, and natural beauty. The Silliman story began with one determined man, one dedicated educator couple, and one supportive community who, in their respective roles, helped build one educational institution that has grown into one of the best in the Philippines. The determined man was Dr. Horace Brinsmaid Silliman, a retired businessman and philanthropist who lived in Coho City, New York State. Over 100 years ago, in 1899, he requested the Presbyterian Board of Foreign Missions in Manhattan to open an industrial school for boys in the Philippines, in a location south of Manila. He would not take no for an answer and gave an initial fund of $10,000 to set up the school he had envisioned, to educate young people he would never meet in a faraway land that he would never see. The two dedicated educators were Dr. David Sutherland Hibbard and his wife Laura, a missionary couple that the board commissioned to establish and operate the suggested school. They were asked to choose a location in any of 3 provinces south of Manila. These are Cebu, Zamboanga, or Iloilo. Call it destiny. But while the couple was in Cebu, someone suggested that they do a side trip to nearby Dumaguete. They came, they saw, and were conquered, so to speak. The idyllic seaside town, the friendly and healthy people, and the able community leaders made the couple decide to set up the school in Dumaguete, which became its supportive host and partner community. Silliman University is now more than 117 years old. It is headed by its 13th president, Dr. Betty Cernal McCann. Installed in 2018, she is the first woman president, following 12 male leaders, 3 Americans, and 9 Filipinos. Granted autonomous status by the Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, Silliman University is a CHED Center of Excellence for Nursing, Information Technology, and Teacher Education, as well as a Center of Development for Biology, Medical Technology, and Marine Sciences. Silliman University has been granted institutional reaccreditation by the Association of Christian Schools, Colleges, and Universities Accrediting Council, Incorporated. Institutional accreditation or reaccreditation is the highest accreditation award ACSCU can give to an educational institution. Silliman's offering of quality Christian education ranges from early childhood to postgraduate level. Its student population of 10,000 counts among the best performing students in the Philippines, and Silliman graduates are among the most sought-after professionals in the private or public sector. In the Visayas region, Silliman University is a recognized leader in community service, a trusted partner of government and non-government organizations. It has pioneered several community projects in healthcare, agriculture, information technology, Christian ministry and outreach, law and justice, governance, youth development, calamity and disaster response, education and training, service learning, and environmental protection. Silliman graduates have established their reputation beyond the Philippine shores. They are valued members of health, business, engineering, science and technology, education, communication, research, and other organizations in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Several Silliman alumni have distinguished themselves through the decades, excelling and leading in their respective fields. Notable Sillimanians include Senator Lorenzo G. Teves in public administration, DepEd Secretary Leonor Magtoles Briones in civil service, Dr. Guy Lopez Cabayao in music, Dr. Julio C. in business, Dr. Angel C. Alcala in the biological and environmental sciences, Drs. Edilberto and Edith Tiempo in and Literature, Director Eddie Romero in Filmmaking and the Arts, Dr. Romeo Ariniego in Medicine, and Dr. Rolando del Carmen in Legal Education, to name a few. Silliman aims to provide whole-person education to every student through the interaction of 5 learning venues that it dubs as the 5 C's of Silliman education: the classroom, the church, the cultural center, the athletic courts, and the community. The classroom includes the university's academic programs, facilities, faculty, and methods of instruction. Silliman University's 19 colleges, institutes, and schools offer some 140 programs, most of which have attained the highest level of accreditation from PAASCO and ACSCU, 2 accrediting bodies recognized by CHED. The Silliman faculty is an assembly of highly qualified professionals and academics whose expertise is recognized not only in the country, but also in North America, Europe, and other parts of the world. Visiting, exchange, and adjunct professors from the university's international partners bring in global knowledge. Silliman faculty do not only teach, they model and they mentor. The church is the heart of the Silliman campus, and Christian faith is the foundation of Silliman education. Beyond developing her knowledge and skills, the student at Silliman develops her capacity to serve fellow human beings. Activities for nurturing the faith, worship, fellowship, and service engage the student year-round. Nevertheless, church activities are designed and organized observing spiritual inclusivity and respect for differences in religious persuasions. The courts refer to athletic activities and competitions. Physical activity is deemed as important as mental activity at Silliman. Facilities for different ball games, swimming, contact sports, archery, and rowing have been developed and opportunities arranged to explore students' potentials. Several Sillimanians have ruled the courts in their time, such as Mark Javier, the lone Filipino male archer at the Beijing Olympics, archers Jennifer Chan and Lisa Ignalaga, and 9th grader Nicole Tagle, long jumper Simeon Toribio. Silliman has long been a leader of arts development in the country. Its programs in music, dance, theater, and visual and literary arts have produced some of the best artists in the Philippines. The Silliman University National Writers Workshop, the longest-running literary workshop in Asia, has been ongoing for almost 60 years. Its founders, Drs. Edilberto and Edith Tiempo, are 2 celebrated Filipino writers in the English language. In recognition of Silliman's leadership in the development of culture and the arts, generous donors have gifted the university with cultural facilities such as the Claire Isabel McGill Luce Auditorium, dubbed as the Cultural Center of the South, and the Ariniego Arts Gallery. Social inclusivity and continuing involvement in the larger community characterize Silliman education. Students are challenged to test theories and principles through actual community work in service learning, an approach that combines reflection with participation in community-based projects to achieve specific learning outcomes. It enables the student to develop a more integrated understanding of theory, practice, and values. Students apply the service learning approach for community-based learning in business development, education, healthcare, legal management, disaster response, and environmental advocacy. Silliman University promotes a service learning approach to provide quality social engagement between the student and the community to develop critical thinking, civic responsibility, and leadership, as well as to strengthen the values of service and compassion.
Come to Silliman if you're seeking opportunities for growth and excellence in every dimension of your life. Be enriched by its holistic and responsive educational program with a Christian orientation. Find yourself in a learning community of highly qualified faculty, dedicated staff, supportive alumni, and exciting co-learners. Feel close to God in the beauty and splendor of the Silliman campus.
Silliman offers education for total human development, an education that is fulfilled in 3 ways: 1. It promotes the convergence of knowledge from various disciplines and areas of learning. 2. It encourages inclusiveness as well as diversity, the acceptance of everyone who comes through Silliman's portals, regardless of culture, class, or creed. And 3. It deepens the spirit of service and widens Silliman students' sense of responsibility to embrace their community, their country, and their planet.
Silliman University is 117 years old, rich with legacies and traditions.
The only thing constant in this world is change.
We, as a university, seek ways to ameliorate the conditions before us today.
And we continue to adapt to the challenges of this changing world.
A leading Christian institution committed to total human development for the well-being of society and environment. And our education is to be used as a tool for the well-being of society and the only place, the earth, we all live in.
Come to think of it, whole person education was with us ever since we began. It starts with values, Christian values, a seed which is planted in every Sillimanian. Our commitment is on fire. Faith, instruction, research, extension.
Whole person education in the university's teaching and non-teaching programs and services. Education for total human development should be sustained as an educational framework.
In Silliman, we strive to offer quality education. And part of the quality education in Silliman is to offer our students a variety of venues for learning. These are what we call the 5 C's of Silliman education. The first C, of course, is the classroom, where students learn and engage professors and faculty who are among the best in the country.
Whole person education as one that promotes multidisciplinarity, inclusiveness, self-direction, and social responsibility.
Responsive to the needs of today.
With liberal arts education, we as an institution provide an atmosphere of inclusion more than exclusion. People of all creeds, people coming from different countries, personal and political orientations, people with different work backgrounds and socio-economic levels can all be a part of a community of learning. The multiple sources of learning here at Silliman that we identify to be the classroom, our athletic grounds, our church, our cultural center, the community in general. All these allow for various perspectives and learning applications that help realize the educational aspirations of all who enter the gates of Silliman.
Sports is integral to Silliman.
The second C would be the courts, the athletic fields, where students and faculty and staff come together regularly in order to celebrate the value of the body in relation to the mind.
Where is multidisciplinarity in whole person education? Subscribing to the concept that education is life necessarily entails that our teaching and learning must go beyond the narrow confines of our individual disciplines. The more collaboration we have with other fields or disciplines, the better we are at approximating the truths we are searching. Promoting multidisciplinarity, linkages, and networks among faculty, staff, and students, as well as interactions between and among academic units and divisions, does not only build skills, but also establish fellowship, harmony among one another.
The third venue for Silliman education would be the cultural centers. Many times in the year, students are given a dose of cultural activities that will allow them to delve into the sensitivities of the human nature.
As to whole person education and self-direction with social responsibility, excellence in programs and services provided to students is not an end of itself. It is hoped that the education attained becomes an instrument for a higher purpose, like doing service to others.
Sillimanians throughout the years have always had the opportunity to learn directly from local communities around Negros Oriental and even throughout the country.
We have community service, structured health teachings. Not only does it improve our skills, we're also given the chance to give back to the community, serve them, and try to empower them in order to build a better community.
Another major feature of Silliman education is this education of the soul and of the spirit through the church. This is where our students learn of the value of nurturing their spiritual life.
What we have right now is on the pre-computer education for the senior citizen, and it is a 3-year commitment of Silliman and to the community.
Whole person education is not just our commitment, it is our way of life. It is who we are. Silliman University.
Before we start our Zoom webinar, let's have a prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to virtually meet together. We come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this virtual webinar. Help us to engage in a meaningful discussion and allow us to grow closer as a group and nurture the bonds of community. Heavenly Father, breathe life into our ideas and decisions. Help us build a team that has love and respect at its heart. Come give us the inspiration to be the best we can be and continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of truth, for the greater glory of you, and for the service of humanity. We ask these things in your holy name. Amen.
Good day and welcome to the Peer Learning Support Series, Whole Person Education, with the theme Care for the Environment and Whole Person Education. Let us welcome our Master of Ceremony, Mr. Renelito Caballo, the Curriculum and Training Coordinator for the Office of Instruction. Let's give him a virtual applause.
Canadian-American philosopher James A. Smith once said, "Education is a holistic endeavor that involves the whole person, including our bodies, in a process of formation that aims our desires, primes our imagination, and orients us to the world, all before we even start thinking about it." Good afternoon, mayong hapon, on the occasion of the celebration of the 120th founding anniversary of Silliman University. The Office of Instruction, in partnership with the College of Education Center for Excellence in Learning, Teaching and Assessment, and the Office of the Silliman Online University Learning, or SOUL, welcomes you to this hybrid panel discussion and write-up on care for the environment and whole person education. In keeping with Silliman University's commitment, in the words of former SU President Ben S. Malayang III, of promoting education that elevates and transforms a person into someone with a higher ability to learn, higher ability to live, higher ability to serve others, and higher ability to serve and to see God, and in meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals to give us a global plan for a sustainable future economically, environmentally, and not least socially. We have gathered in this virtual meeting resource persons of indisputable expertise and expansive experience, all of whom I will have the honor to introduce later. Now, during this engagement, may I request you, highly esteemed participants and guests, to rename your Zoom name according to your complete name. May I likewise ask you to prefix to your name the department or unit you are coming from. Mute your microphone when not in use. Switch your videos on if your internet connection allows you. Ask questions after the three talks or later during the open forum. You will please use the raise hand icon in the reaction button below and unmute your microphone once recognized. Or you may key in your question in the chat box below for the moderator to read it. Due to the very limited time though, our panelists may not be able to accommodate all your questions. However, you may wish to discuss your concerns with fellow participants once you are in your breakout rooms. You have been pre-assigned your breakout rooms. You may get access though to these rooms only when you join this Zoom meeting using your official Silliman email account. But our SOUL staff and personnel are on standby to assist you should you have problems getting to the breakout rooms later. And this session is recorded. SOUL will save the recording and upload it to their YouTube channel for anyone who may wish to watch again this discussion. To formally welcome you all, may I turn the virtual floor now to Dr. Beulah Rose R. Torres, Office of Instruction Director.
Greetings to everyone. Last Friday, the Philippine Council for NGO Certification, or PCNC, interviewed me together with the deans. The question centered on how Silliman designs its projects and how we utilize the project evaluation results. The accreditor appreciated how we do things here, but what he valued most was that when Silliman plans and innovates, we consider the standards of the Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, and the views of our stakeholders. He also appreciated that we anchor our strategies on the university's vision, mission, and goals. For the PCNC accreditor, these are the ingredients of a sustainable higher education institution. Thus, we conceptualize this panel discussion based on the vision of Silliman, which states, and I quote, to be a leading Christian institution committed to total human development for the well-being of society and environment. The required course on whole person education that most of you teach expresses Silliman's commitment to total human development. However, to ensure that every student who leaves our portals embodies the components of holistic competencies for the benefit of our society, we suggest that specific topics and issues about environment will be deliberately integrated into the whole person education, or WPE, syllabus. We know that not all faculty teaching WPE has a solid background in environment. However, you can teach it by simply pointing out to students the compelling global problems that threaten our environment. You can explain to students the university's stand about contentious local issues. You can utilize existing speeches, debates, conversations, and talks on YouTube to foster Earth stewardship. The Old and New Testament scriptures abound with references to God's creation, not only to declare His glory, but also to remind us to care for His creation. In other words, we can structure our WPE syllabus to reflect care for the environment, particularly in the learning outcomes. For example, you can encourage students to research and engage with community through e-service learning with the environment as the focus area. The acronym FIRE, or FIRE, determines if the dimensions of faith, instruction, research, and extension are visible in the WPE target learning outcomes related to environment. Care for the environment is everybody's business, no matter your specialization. Needless to say, whether one is uneducated or one is a student or a faculty with degrees in MA or PhD and what have you, we all breathe the same air, we all trod on the same soil, and we all fish from the same seawater. You see, when God instructed Adam and Eve to take care of the environment, God didn't say they must specialize in marine biology or geology to be more effective as stewards of planet Earth. Irrespective of one's political color or the side one takes about controversial reclamation or island building issues, let's heed what the famous late evangelist Billy Graham said, and I quote, "When we see the world as a gift from God, we will do our best to take care of it and use it wisely instead of poisoning or destroying it." End quote. We hope that we realize that God made every human being accountable for how they treat nature. But wait a minute, what is whole person education? And how is it exactly related to care for the environment? The input of our speakers today is valuable as we collaboratively restructure and reframe the WPE syllabus during the breakout sessions. On this note, let me warmly welcome all the participants, the keynote speaker and the panelists, the WPE faculty, the fire directors, fire members of the Dean's Conference Special Committee, fire coordinators, and all the observers. We listen to your voice, not only to sustain the existence of Silliman University, but more importantly, to preserve and care for God's creation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Torres. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker, Dr. Hope Antone, is responsible for faculty development programs in whole person education for the Southeast Asia region. Before joining the United Board in 2012, she was on the faculty of Payap University in Chiang Mai, Thailand, after completing 2 terms as Executive Secretary of the Christian Conference of Asia. She taught Christian education, ecumenics, and feminist theology at McGilvray College of Divinity in Payap University. She previously taught mass communication at Silliman University College of Mass Communication and Christian Education at Silliman University Divinity School. She holds Bachelor of Mass Communication and Master of Divinity degrees from Silliman University, Master of Theology from the Presbyterian Theological College and Seminary in Seoul, Korea, and Doctor of Education from the Union Presbyterian Seminary in Richmond, Virginia, USA. Our panelist is former president of Silliman University, who was also once professor and dean of the School of Environmental Science and Management at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. He was also senior fellow of the Strategic Study Group of the National Defense College of the Philippines, coordinating lead author of the chapter on Sub-Global Assessment, Millennium Ecosystem Assessment of the United Nations. He was also former DENR Undersecretary. At present, Dr. Malayang is Emeritus Professor of Environmental Policy and Governance at the SU Institute of Environmental and Marine Sciences. He is also Vice Chair of the Foundation for Philippine Environment, Senior Fellow and member of the Academic Council of the Development Academy of the Philippines, Principal Investigator in the South Negros site of the USAID Fish Rights Program, and member of the CSO Advisory Group of the World Bank Philippines. Our third panelist, Dr. Jorge Emanuel, is an adjunct professor in the Institute of Environmental and Marine Sciences and in the College of Engineering and Design at Silliman University. He has been consultant to the World Health Organization, United Nations Environment Program, U.S. National Institutes of Health, other international agencies and non-governmental organizations in over 40 countries dealing with solid waste management, hazardous and infectious waste management, environmental health, health risk assessments, infection control and prevention, waste to energy technologies, and climate change mitigation and adaptation, microplastics, and zero waste. He received his doctorate in chemical engineering at the University of Michigan and holds degrees and certificates in chemistry from North Carolina State University, environmental management from the University of California at Berkeley, energy technologies from Stanford University, and public health from the University of Iowa. Friends, let us cordially give a virtual round of applause to our keynote speaker and our panelists.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very grateful to Dr. Beulah Rose Torres for the invitation to be part of this uh, right shop on care for the environment and whole person education. And I'm very touched and grateful that my alma mater, Silliman University, which hosted and co-organized the recent joint consultation with ACUCA and the United Board on envisioning preferred futures of Christian higher education in Asia, is also spearheading this integration of care for the environment in WPE courses. I understand that my role has to do with two questions. First, how is care for the environment related to whole person education? And second, how do we integrate care for the environment in whole person education courses? I take it to mean, however, that I will spend most of my 15-minute presentation on the first one. And if you agree with me on that, I am sure that during your ride shop, you will be doing number two. But I will say a bit about that as well. So for us, whole person education is not a new concept. The United Board did not really start this idea, this notion of whole person education. It was always there, especially with institutions offering liberal arts education. It's just not defined in one way. There's not a single definition that would fully grasp what is meant by whole person education. So other institutions have been using holistic education, which is engaging the mind, the body, and the spirit. And as far as I can remember, when I was studying at Silliman University, I used to hear this phrase, development of the total person. And of course, it's similar to holistic education. The emphasis had always been on mind, body, and spirit. Now, for the United Board, we chose three key terms, intellectual, spiritual, ethical dimensions of development. So in 2015, the United Board decided to articulate its mission as developing the person intellectually, spiritually, and ethically. So for us, these are the key words that we want to focus in our programmatic work with institutions. But the institutions continue to have perhaps a broader definition of whole person education. Now, I will try to expound the three keywords, and I will use, or I will link this intellectual development, spiritual development, ethical development. I will link this concept with what the UNESCO in 1996 articulated as the 4 pillars of education: learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, learning to live with others. And I can find them very much linked with the 3 keywords for the United Board's definition or mission concept of whole person education. So let me look at it this way, or explain it this way. Intellectual development is more than the acquisition of information or gaining new knowledge and expertise about a field or discipline. Rather, it should include critical thinking, really engaging with concepts and ideas, even phenomena, problems, really going for the root of issues rather than just the surface level. And it is also having to do with learning to learn. So similar to the UNESCO, learning to know, because it is the process of learning that will last longer. If we know how to learn, how to know, then it is going to last for a much longer period of time, even for our whole life. And that's why it's related to lifelong learning. It is also related to creativity and innovation, because that is when there is that learning to know and learning to learn, one doesn't stop. One keeps on asking how some ideas or some concepts can be applied, can be actualized, can be tested, and therefore implemented in life. And so that is the intellectual development that we are looking at the United Board. As far as spiritual development is concerned, so this is linked to the learning to be and learning to live with others that the UNESCO has articulated. Because being spiritual is not just an acquisition of knowledge about one's religion or faith, but it's really becoming. So it's really achieving the potential of one's being. And what is that potential of one's being like, if not in relationship with others? First of all, there is that healthy relationship with the self, knowledge of oneself, and therefore connectedness to oneself. That's why we say, are you true to who you are? Are you true to yourself? So that requires a spiritual development when you know who you are. And of course, being who you are is for us, especially for us Christians, is connected to others. We cannot be who we are without that sound relationship with others. And others does not only mean, the word others does not only refer to people. Others also refers to the different parts of creation, the different created creatures by God. And that's why we also need to look at the environment, animals, the plants, the soil, air, water. All these we also need to be connected with. And the other concept in spiritual development that we also want to emphasize at the United Board is that our connectedness needs to go beyond ourselves, beyond who we are. It should be connected to the higher being or the higher meaning of life, the higher purpose of life. And that can be humanistic rather than religious. So this is the type of spiritual development that we're talking about. Then for ethical development, it has to do with learning to do. And it has to do with doing based on responsible decision making. So it is knowing, being able to know and decide between right and wrong, and to be able to solve problems, overcome dilemmas based on such responsible decision making. So these three key terms, intellectual development, spiritual development, ethical development, explained this way, constitute what we mean by whole person education. So the models of whole person education can also be varied. And from what I observe, not only at Silliman, but also in other institutions within the United Board Network, is that one model can be offering whole person education as a course. Some institutions offer a course called holistic education, for example. And other institutions don't necessarily offer a course called whole person education, but they intentionally have it as the philosophy of the whole institution. So let us take WPE as a course, for example. As a course, it becomes the explicit curriculum where students actually see it on paper, how the course has to be taken, what are the requirements, how it is graded, what are the content, areas to be covered, assignments that are required, and how evaluation and assessment are done. So here as a course, WPE is dealt with as more as the content. So what is whole person education? So the focus therefore is on WPE as the content in the course. And however that is divided in chunks through topics and corresponding assignments, as well as assessment points, then that will be the part of the course of whole person education. For institutions that regard WPE, whole person education, more as a philosophy, they would have it, they would look at it and implement it more as the implicit curriculum. It may not be talked about, it may not be discussed in a course as whole person education per se, but it is there as the undergirding philosophy. And therefore, the idea or the question, the more important question for institutions that do this is how do we do whole person education? So not so much the what, but the how. And so the focus therefore is on pedagogy, the teaching methodology, regardless of the course. So it can be courses in pure science, it can be courses in social sciences, arts, what have you, physical education, whatever. So it is more of how the courses are taught, regardless of what the contents are, that would then demonstrate that the institutions follow whole person education as a philosophy. And therefore, not so much on the content per se. The concern is more about the learning environment, where and how learning happens. Then it has to do with the relationship between teacher and students, between students as peers, between the subject and the community, the wider community, the classroom and the wider community. So it's all this, if you look at whole person education as a philosophy. So these are possible models that institutions can follow. There's no right or wrong here. But I think the question for this right shop is how then can the care for the environment, the natural environment, be incorporated, integrated, embedded in whole person education courses. So with this question, I think I'll try to answer with the following points. There is, if this is for all WPE courses, as in Silliman, then We know that learning to be, which is learning to live with others, as well as learning to do, will include our relationship with the total ecology. So we are in a web of life, and therefore care for environment is a natural part of whole person education. In various courses where whole person education is the undergirding philosophy, the care for the environment will be also added through pedagogy, through their learning environment, or through the courses. By nature of the courses, they can be easily integrated. So we can do both models. That's what I'm saying. And of course, it can always be a part of the three functions of the university: research, teaching, and service. Again, what has happened is that these three have been separated, fragmented. Sometimes they're even viewed as competitors, as rival functions of the university. But what we need to do is integrated scholarship. The scholarship of discovery, which is research, the scholarship of teaching, which is dissemination of new knowledge, and then the scholarship of service, which is the application of the knowledge and the sharing of such knowledge with a wider community. So for my last slide, I'd like to relate the care for environment in potentially some examples of topics that can be added to whole person education courses or to other courses that will have a natural fit for adding these items or possible topics. So I'm thinking of climate change or climate justice, sustainable development, progress and poverty, or God's world, our home. And of course, this can always be linked to the current hot topic in Dumaguete right now, the 174 hectare reclamation. So there are many, many topics that can be added to any course that can relate to this care for environment. But basically, what we are really aiming at is ecological literacy, which implies, again, what we have already said, intellectual, spiritual, and ethical dimensions. Ecological literacy needs multiple approaches, and ecological literacy leads to multi-sectoral action. So basically, it is really going to be interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. And just like what is happening now, you have different perspectives looking at this proposed project of the reclamation. You have perspectives from the environmental scientists. We have perspectives from the legal people, the law and the lawyers. We have perspectives from economics, business, perspectives from the poor, from the people who are most affected, the vulnerable, perspectives of different citizens of the city, and even the neighboring communities. So that's why ecological literacy will really need that whole person education approach of being all-encompassing, multiple in approaches, multiple in sectoral participation, multiple in concerns, and multiple in perspectives. So thank you very much. This ends my sharing with you, and I hope to be able to respond to questions should there be any later on. Thank you.
We shall immediately proceed to the presentations.
Good day to everyone. I would like to first thank
the Office of Instruction for this opportunity to share with you some thoughts on environmental justice and how this could relate to the fundamental vision and mission and goals of Silliman University. We may first begin with what many people commonly think of justice. And for most people, justice is about some kind of reciprocity. The first one would be relating to positive reciprocity of providing equal good to each other. So something like utang na loob in Filipino, where one thinks that if I give you one, justice demands that in turn you give me one. Yet on the other hand, there is also a concept of negative reciprocity, a concept of justice being about having equal harms, something relating to an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, that if you harm me, justice demands that I harm you as well. And these are the two common notions of justice. Meanwhile, when we start relating to the whole concept of environmental justice, we might begin with the idea that there is a context, a fundamental context to this whole idea of environmental justice. And this context of environmental justice, it stems from three fundamental facts about environmental issues. The first fact about environmental issues is that these issues are emotional. They affect people, their properties, and their sense of well-being. That almost always when we start thinking of an environmental issue like flooding, typhoons, displacement of farms, displacement of fisheries, these affect people. And when they affect people, they become an emotional issue. So environmental issues are really about matters that seriously affect people and the places that people are in and which are dear to many of them. And so this is the first thing that we need to recognize, that when you talk of environmental issues, one can hardly be objective about this because they do affect you personally or affect your loved ones very clearly emotionally. However, the second fact about the environmental context or issue context of environmental justice is that while environmental issues are emotional, environmental solutions are technical. Technical in the sense that environmental solutions are about harnessing the best mix of science, art, law, morals, and technology to justly, appropriately resolve those issues that emotionally affect people. And while we can lay out environmental solutions, an array of solutions that are technical in nature, the third fact about environmental issues is that decisions about what solutions to take to address these emotional issues tend to be political. These decisions are about making choices on multiple and often conflicting individual and group interests to achieve an optimum level of public good relating to environmental issues that affect people emotionally and that are about solutions to address these issues.
So, when you talk of environmental justice, one must recognize the context of it, that environmental issues are emotional, environmental solutions are technical, but environmental decisions are political. So, what is environmental justice? Most notions of environmental justice defines it as the fair treatment and the meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies that are intended to address the emotionally displacing environmental issues that affect society. So environmental justice has these four major elements. There is a need for fair treatment of the issue and the dimensions of the issue. And an environmental issue, including longer periods of rainy seasons than and wet seasons and dry seasons, such as what happened with La Nina or El Nino, the worsening climate crisis, rising sea level rise, sea levels in the world, rising heat across the world, local issues like pollution, the waterways being no longer available for swimming and all that. Even scarcity of water supply and of electricity. All of this require to be treated fairly. That's the first thing. And when you say fair, it must be fair to the people affected and the life systems that provide the fundamental basis for people to live. People could not live in isolation without the trees that provide the oxygen that one can breathe. And lately we have known that phytoplanktons and planktons and seagrasses actually produce 70% of the oxygen of the earth. A lot of our carbon sequestration, meaning to say the absorption of atmospheric carbon, sequestering them, putting them together and locking them, which would therefore reduce climate change and heating of the earth, are actually done more by sea systems in our oceans than in our land. And we have known, for example, that the regulation of typhoons and other extreme weather events and weather events in general in our planet are more done by our seas and oceans than by our land. And so fair treatment would mean treating the people fairly and their interests fairly, but as well without forgetting that the life systems on Earth that allow for life to actually continue on Earth and therefore for human society to continue existing on Earth must be treated fairly as well. And when you talk of fair treatment, that's just one of the elements of environmental justice. The second element is the meaningful involvement of all who are affected by a project. That's why an environmental compliance certificate requires that before it can be issued, there's a general agreement and consensus of those affected by a project that to them, the mitigations that are set in the environmental clearance certificate would be sufficient to ensure that the harms of a project can be acceptable to society. And so there is this meaningful involvement of people of all race, color, national origin, or income, meaning to say there is no stratification. For everyone that are to be affected, they have to be also meaningfully involved in the decision-making over what solutions need to be put in place to address environmental issues. But there's a tacit recognition here that meaningful involvement also means involvement of those that cannot articulate their interests, such as the fishes in our oceans, the coral reefs in our oceans, the trees in our mountains, the grasses in our meadows. All of this have to have also a quote-unquote say on what would be deemed a justice a justice solution to our environmental issues. And because they cannot, of course, stand in court or write blogs and other things, people are assumed to be responsible in seeing to it that the interest of these life systems, other than human life systems, that the interest of our seagrasses, of our meadows, of our animals, biodiversity, etc., are properly, fairly treated in the decisions over how to address our environmental issues. And basically, Oposa versus Pactoran had shown that there is a recognition by the court that even those that cannot say anything about their future has to be recognized and considered when looking at what needs to be done today in order to address environmental issues that would be fair to those in the future generation of our country. And in another case, the Manila Bay case, even the oysters in Cavite affected by the pollution in Manila Bay are recognition as having a legal standing to be properly addressed, and their quality of life must be addressed by the court as well. So that is what meaningful involvement is. Those affected, whether they can say what they need to say, or those that are affected, even if they cannot say much about what and how we affect their well-being, the biodiversity and others. Now, the third element is that there is no stratification of the people that are to be involved. Everyone, whether you're an ordinary fisher person, a farmer, or a high-level official, all of us have to have an equal say and a meaningful involvement in a decision-making. This is not about who has the power and who has the position. Environmental justice demands that all will be involved. And this involvement will not be limited to only one piece of decision or another piece of decision, but on the whole gamut of developing, implementing, and enforcing environmental laws, regulations, and policies, or undertaking projects like reforestation or reclamation. Now, I have here what I believe is an operational matrix of how to undertake a fair and just decision-making process on finding the technical solutions to deeply emotional environmental issues that we need to address. The matrix recognizes that for every solution, there is an economic, ecological, and socio-cultural aspect to that solution. And for each of these economic, ecological, and socio-cultural aspects, there will always be a good, a bad, and an ugly aspect of any solution. And so, for example, when you talk of, say, reclamation, because that's one of the things that preoccupy us most these days, we can say that from an economic perspective, yes, there is a good to doing reclamation, like it will increase the businesses that would be happening in Dumaguete, and so there will be higher property values, and therefore more tax revenues and services for the city. In fact, this is what the major argument of the proponents of reclamation, the 174 reclamation, 174 hectare reclamation that the city is proposing or has entertained as a unsolicited proposal from a business that is not from Dumaguete. So there is a good aspect to any solution, including reclamation. That is a good aspect from an economic perspective. And from an ecological perspective, reclamation could be good in the sense that it offers more open spaces, and then of course minimizes tidal risks and vulnerabilities. And there could be also sociocultural goods and advantages, such as more spaces for sports, public events, festivals, amenities such as malls and promenades and others, and spaces for socialization like concert halls and whatever others. Yes, and so it is therefore this part of the solution, such as for reclamation, to solve issues about less space available in Dumaguete for expansion and for progress. We can say that, and they will argue that there is a good, an economic, ecological, and sociocultural good to a reclamation. But at the same time, we need to recognize that environmental justice demands that we must also see the bad, not just the good. One cannot just concentrate on the good without recognizing the bad and the ugly aspects of these solutions, such as a reclamation. The bad, for example, from an economic perspective, a higher property value would make it harder for local residents with clearly lower incomes to stay in the place. They cannot anymore afford to stay there. For example, not many people, other than if you are multimillionaire, could afford to stay in Ayala Alabang or in Forbes Park. The property values there are just so high that one cannot afford to be there. So that's the economic aspect, a bad aspect. So while from the economic perspective, a reclamation, again, as our focus of example, may offer a good, such as more businesses, higher property taxes, and therefore tax revenues and services for the city. They could also be a bad, because the higher property taxes and values would make it harder for many local residents to continue staying in Dumaguete or be able to stay in that reclamation where the reclamation is to be done. From the ecological perspective, it could be good because there's many open spaces, but there could be more risks to nearby shorelines and nearby fisheries and coral reefs in Tanion Strait, in Apo, and Siquijor. That could be affected by the flow of the disruption of the tidal patterns and the flow of currents in this area, including the loss of much coral reefs that supply larvae to other places nearby Cebu, Siquijor, and Tanion Strait, Apo, and northern Mindanao. So that would be the ecological bad, so to speak. And if you look at the sociocultural, while there are more spaces, the higher property values become added tax burdens to residents. And so with that, there could be a pressure for residents to stay away or transfer elsewhere. Now, on the other hand, while there is the good, there's the bad, there could also be the ugly, meaning harms to people and the place, loss of life spaces, and of life systems. So if there is a good aspect to that, a good economic aspect to a reclamation, there is also a bad aspect, and there could also be an ugly aspect. That means the higher income groups would eventually displace the current residents. In fact, if we are talking of condos and high-rises and heliports and yacht clubs, that clearly is not intended for Dumagueteños who cannot even afford, not all can even afford to have a pump boat, so to speak, or be able to build a house of their own. So these are the ugly part of the economic aspects of, say, a reclamation, or any solution to environmental issues that one can think of. The ecological ugly would be that nearby people and places would get flooded. There will be lower fish catches, not only in Dumaguete, but also elsewhere. And Dumaguete Bay would get shallower for shipping. And so this is why the Philippine Ports Authority is very concerned with this as well. And in the socio-cultural, there could be, because of less ability to stay in this place, or we get swamped by new residents that are able to afford a place more than we are able to. There could be a breakup of the community in the sense of its institutions, mga neighborhoods, our traditions, and our community leadership structures could change. Instead of having neighbors as our local political leaders, it could become that it could come to a point where we hardly know who are the political leaders, nor have they been long residents in the area. These are some of the things that one can think of. Again, these are just examples of what the matrix says, is that when we look at all of this, we need to not only see one aspect, the good or the bad or the ugly, but the consideration of all of these things. And so justice demands that when you look at the good across economy, ecology, and the cultural aspect, then you have to consider that, yes, this would be good if they are all desired by the people. And if they are desired by the people, then they would be good. Now, they would be bad if, from the economic perspective, ecological perspective, and the socio-cultural perspective, these bads really translate to affecting people. And you have to look at how many would be less affected and how many would be more affected. And in terms of the ugly, yes, also you look at the number of people that could be justly compensated or not compensated. So all of these things have to be considered. And then we go into decision making that would be best described as a calculus of consideration of all of this bad, good, and ugly together, until we can arrive at, together as a people in a community, arrive at the extent that our choices would be acceptable to all of us, considering all this good, bad, and ugly from an economic, ecological, and socio-cultural perspective. We need to balance this. So how much of the good as against the bad and against the ugly can we all agree as a people with our leaders? How much of the ecological good, bad, and uglies can we all agree as acceptable to all of us, people and leaders? And how much of the socio-cultural good, bad, and ugly could we all agree to be acceptable to all of us as leaders? And we balance all of this in order to come up with this final decision of the extent that our choice of this solution would be acceptable to us. And if they are acceptable to us, that they have high legal and moral legitimacy. This is the operationalization of this whole notion of environmental justice in relation to the fact that environmental issues are emotional, environmental technical solutions are technical, and environmental decisions are political. And I'd like to subscribe to the idea that a decision, a political decision, has to be a careful calculus of this good, bad, and ugly across economy, ecology, and culture of any consideration. Not only one aspect, but all aspects together in balance. That's fair treatment of the issues. Now, and therefore, we see four basic truths here. We cannot live without ecology. Ecology is life. Now, there are some distinctions between environment and ecology. Environment is the general state of things that provide the context of where we are and where we live. But ecology refers to the dynamics of life and life support systems that happen in any given place and time that allows for life to happen in that place. Therefore, there is no such thing as an irrelevant life in a life system. The smallest molecule with some parts protein that has life is part of the ecology that can even upend economies and society if they become a source for a pandemic illness. So ecology is life. The fish in our oceans has much to do with how we are going to survive eventually, even if we do not eat fish. There are these things that everything is interrelated, and the root systems provide the leaves that we can enjoy. We may not see the roots, but ecology is life. And there is no economy nor society without ecology. It's been already proven many times that disregard of what has been indicated as the rising frequency of pandemics that have actually been anticipated since 1997 in the first reports of the Intergovernmental Panel, they have not been taken into account by our economic planners, by our financial planners, and all that. And now all of a sudden pandemics have come about, and the economy just got upended. Society and our institutions got upended. So we need to be very clear. Ecology is life, and there's no economy nor society without ecology. And sustainable ecology is sustainable life. That's the third basic truth. And therefore, the fourth truth is sustainable life is rooted on the breadth and depth of environmental justice. Because ecology and human beings subsisting on ecology as a fundamental support system for our economy and our society, we are the ones that make decisions that will alter these ecological patterns. And therefore, if we fail to make decisions that are just or are along the considerations of environmental justice for both people affected and the life systems, biodiversity and coral reefs and all others life systems on Earth are affected. If we fail to consider that, we fail on environmental justice, we could fail on ecology being life. Now, so finally, we have said that there are these common notions of justice of exerting equal good or exacting equal harms. But there's this uncommon notion of justice, a good for the harms, the redemptive justice that many of us in Silliman are familiar with. Love your enemies. This is not a common sense about justice. All of a sudden, in Matthew 5:43-48, we are being told, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on both the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Ecological systems are both for the good and the bad. So if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. This is not a common notion of justice, but this is what we in Silliman are being told to consider very seriously. that distinguishes Silliman education from other kinds, just the common notions of justice, education and the common notions of justice. And when you go to a law school, they will tell you that there are regulations that are intended to provide a good distribution of good and harms across society. If you violate these regulations, there will be penalties against you because you will be exacting much harm more than the good that you create for society. But Christ Jesus tells us another way. For every harm that are presented to you, do good anyway. Love your enemies. And so, my friends, I'd like to end with this slide on the uncommon notion of environmental justice, the Silliman way. And that is this. Environmental justice is to fairly decide, and by this we mean judiciously and participatorily. Decide fairly on what technical solutions, scientific, legal, moral, and yes, even aesthetic, would best address emotional environmental issues, but not just in any way address, but in ways that promote total human development that brings well-being of all in society and all in the environment. This is the Silliman way of environmental justice. And if we're able to mainstream this notion of environmental justice among our students, I would think that the Silliman educated person would be looking at environmental justice not just from the legal perspective, the scientific and technical perspective, but from the perspective of this uncommon notion of justice, the Silliman way. A Silliman way anchored on what Christ has said would be the way, the truth, and the life. And what this means simply is this, that we achieve sustainable lives and lifestyles in a living planet created by God. We do not recognize coral reefs as just to be buried. We do not recognize development as just about providing more opportunities for those who can better afford condos and yachts and helicopters, but to do environmental justice for all those affected, including the pedicab drivers of Dumaguete, including the small fishers from Piapi, and yes, including the businessmen in our city who needs to expand their businesses. All of these have to be taken together, including, of course, the interest of our political leaders to want to see to it that their leadership is established in terms of monuments to their achievements. But all of this have to be taken within the notion, the uncommon notion of environmental justice, the Silliman way. Fairly decide, judiciously, participatorily, what technical solutions, scientific, legal, moral, aesthetic, would best address emotional environmental issues in our place at this time in ways that promote total human development that brings well-being of all in society and all in the environment, and thus achieve sustainable lives and sustainable lifestyles in what we must always remember is a living planet created by God. I thank you very much, and I thank you for this time. Salamat po.
Good afternoon to all. Let me begin by saying that I'm a true believer in whole person education, because humans are not just workhorses, we're not just intellectual beings, we are also social, ethical, and spiritual beings. We shouldn't be in the business of just providing skills to fill vacancies in the labor market. The world is much better off when we develop persons that are empathetic to those around them and society as a whole, persons that live their lives for a purpose greater than their own self-interest, persons who feel their connection to all of creation and are committed to its caring for the greater good. We need this now more than ever because for once in human history, we are facing threats to human existence, and the source of these threats are not just meteors from outer space, but humans themselves. Let me describe each of these three examples. Global climate change. Last August 9, hundreds of scientists around the world released the 6th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC. It concluded that the Earth is warming even faster than anticipated, as shown in the graph, and we will reach or exceed 1.5 degrees centigrade in the next 20 years. At 2 degrees centigrade, the heat extremes will reach the critical threshold for our agriculture and for our health. There will be more extreme temperature events, more intense typhoons and flooding, more severe coastal erosion, and the sea level events that before occurred only once in 100 years could happen every year by the end of this century. I urge you to read the IPCC reports found in the web links shown on the slide. Loss of biodiversity. We are experiencing a substantial and irreversible loss of biodiversity on Earth. For example, 10 to 30% of mammals, birds, and amphibian species are threatened with extinction. 90% of our large fishes in the ocean have disappeared in the last 50 years, etc. The rate of extinction is estimated at 100 to 1,000 times higher than pre-human times. The last mass extinction, the 5th mass extinction, took place some 66 million years ago with the combination of an asteroid that hit the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico and the massive volcanic eruptions in the Deccan Flats in India resulted in the extinction of 76% of all species on Earth, including the dinosaurs. Some scientists believe that at the rate we are going today, the Earth may be approaching the 6th mass extinction. Waste, plastics, and chemical pollution. Today, the world generates about 2 billion tons per year of waste. Before the 1940s, most of that waste simply biodegraded naturally and returned to the soil. Today, our waste includes plastics, of which we produce about 400 million tons per year. But these plastics stay in the environment for hundreds of years and eventually form microplastics. By the year 2050, there will be more plastics than fish in our oceans. The microplastics that are formed are chemical vectors. That is, they attract toxic chemicals from the environment. Today, there are more than 140,000 chemicals on the market, and many are part of our daily life, from pesticides, household cleaners, fire retardants in our textiles and electronics, to chemicals in our personal care products. Synthetic chemicals, many of which came to existence only in the last few decades, are now part of our waste. And we are only now learning more about the links between these toxic chemicals to cancer and their toxic effects on our endocrine systems, reproductive systems, our nervous systems, our livers and kidneys, etc. As microplastics become ubiquitous in our seafood, our drinks, even our air, in the coming decades, our exposures to these toxic chemicals from the environment will increase dramatically. We could teach our students about these environmental threats and hope that enlightened self-interest will cause them to act. But a whole person education imparts an awareness of interconnectedness, of caring, and a commitment to stewardship of creation that goes beyond self-interest. Whole person education also facilitates action because it's through action, such as community engagement, that we apply our knowledge and learn to live in service to others. The range of community engagements and service learning opportunities for environmental justice, sustainability, and stewardship is broad and limited only by our imagination. For climate change, for example, students can help organize or participate in the planting and nurturing of trees in our parks or along roads, the planting of mangroves in our coastal areas. Students can work with children to educate them on climate change and what to do using art, theater, or storytelling. Students can help provide solar or wind power to remote schools and rural health units, assist local disaster risk reduction and management offices, DRMOs, in outreach and communication, in teaching first aid, in improving evacuation centers, and other aspects of climate mitigation and adaptation. To address biodiversity loss, students can organize or participate in habitat restoration, assist in monitoring the degradation of forests, coral reefs, seagrass beds, or other habitats, develop tools to assist local Bantay Dagat volunteers in monitoring and patrolling coastal waters, find ways to promote and support organic farms, work with Puroks on planting native trees and flowers to support local wildlife, increase public awareness on the importance of biodiversity conservation, and participate in the campaign against the proposed 174-hectare Islands Reclamation Project. To address the problem of waste, we need to implement Republic Act 9003 on ecological solid waste management. Community engagements by students could include finding ways to promote and educate about segregation at source, assisting schools, subdivisions, puroks, or barangays build small decentralized materials recovery facilities, promote recycling by disseminating information about recyclable materials and how much each junk shop will pay for them, building pipe composting, bin composting, rotating barrel composting, windrow composting, vermicomposting, and other composting systems for homes, schools, puroks, barangays, and other communities. An approach to the broader problem of waste, plastics, and pollution is zero waste, which includes ecological solid waste management, but is much more. Zero waste is a goal, an approach, and a set of principles focused on the prevention of waste. Zero waste is the conversion of all resources by means of responsible production, such as the design and manufacture of products to reduce waste, and the use of sustainable packaging. And it is also responsible consumption to maximize reuse, recovery, and recycling of products, packaging, and materials without burning and with no discharges to land, water, or air that threaten the environment or human health. Community engagements by students on zero waste include promoting the use of biodegradable native bags and other reusable packaging for shopping, working with emerging zero waste stores in Dumaguete, expanding zero waste schools, businesses, and institutions in the city, supporting the campaign against pyrolysis gasification of the Silliman University Student Government Environment Committee, or supporting zero waste work in the 5 barangays that are now part of the Zero Waste Cities Project Dumaguete, namely Bantayan, Looc, Tiapi, Banilad, and Kalindagan. But please do not do what one Silliman fraternity did. About 2 years ago, we were told by zero waste workers in Looc that a group in from Silliman held a lecture on zero waste for them. The workers, who by the way all graduated from the Zero Waste Academy, felt they were being lectured by students on a topic that the workers knew a lot more about and had already been putting into practice for a year. But the worst part was that the students provided snacks and drinks in plastic containers and left behind a lot of waste for the barangay to deal with. That is, the students gave a lecture to zero waste workers on zero waste, but did not bother to put their words into practice. It would have been an excellent opportunity for those students to even learn about zero waste from the workers themselves. I would like to focus on one recommended activity which has personal, home, and community engagement and service learning applications. It is called WABA, or the Waste Assessment and Brand Audit, one of the tools of zero waste. There are two components of a WABA. One, a waste assessment to determine the amounts and percentages of each type of waste collected from your home, from your school, or your community from 5 to 7 days, according to the categories of biodegradable, recyclable, special, and residual waste. And two, a brand audit, which is sorting out residual waste even further and determining the brands of products in the residual waste. I recommend that students and faculty conduct a WABA in their homes first. Instructions on how to do a WABA and data forms are provided in the websites shown in this slide. After completing the WABA, the results of the WABA require reflection, discernment, and action. The WABA identifies what products we need to replace with more environmentally sound alternatives, or products that we need to consume less of, or products that we need to buy in larger bulk to reduce our waste. In an individual and home level, the WABA is a tool for learning to be a socially responsible consumer. In the neighborhood, purok, or barangay level, the WABA is a tool for education, for determining the proper sizes of materials recovery facilities, for setting goals on maximizing community recycling and composting, to determine potential revenues for communities, and, as required by law, to increase diversion rates. That is, the percentage of waste that is diverted from landfills or dump sites as a result of source reduction, recycling, and composting. After a student gains experience and insight from their own individual or home WABA, students can then work with communities to conduct WABAs as a first step towards going zero waste. At the national and international level, the WABA is a tool for policy and advocacy. WABA results have been compiled in the Philippines and around the world and have been used to pressure top brands responsible for much of the residual waste in the Philippines or around the world to change their products, packaging, and distribution systems under the principle of extended producer responsibility. You and your students could share your data through the web links provided and join the thousands of volunteers around the world working to bring about change through their WABA data. I hope I have given you some ideas on incorporating environmental justice, sustainability, and stewardship into a whole person education curriculum through specific topics on climate change and resiliency, biodiversity conservation, and zero waste in a manner that impacts our communities. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hope Antone, our keynote speaker, Dr. Jorge Emanuel, and Dr. Ben Subong Malayang III, our panelists, for your highly instructive and emboldening presentations. In recognition to your contribution to the university's academic life and vision, we wish to virtually award you these certificates of recognition. First, Certificate of Recognition to Dr. Hope Antone, keynote speaker, Care for the Environment and Whole Person Education, signed Dr. Beulah Rose R. Torres. Once again, thank you, Dr. Hope Antone. Certificate of Recognition is given to Dr. Ben S. Malayang III, panelist, Care for the Environment and Whole Person Education, signed Dr. Beulah Rose R. Torres, Director for Instruction. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Ben Malayang III. And of course, the same certificate of recognition to Dr. Jorge A. Emanuel, panelist, Care for the Environment and Whole Person Education, signed Dr. Beulah Rose R. Torres, Director of Instruction. Thank you, Dr. Jorge Emanuel. Shall we all give all three speakers our our round of applause. You can click from the reaction button, the applause, just like we're all doing right now. Thank you again to our resource persons. We shall now proceed to the brief and quick open forum. Now, earlier on, we were told that all three, some of them might not be able to make it tonight, this afternoon, but we are very fortunate to say that all three of them are with us. And so it's now time for you to ask questions, should you have any. I was monitoring the chat box earlier on and I saw nothing so far except that there's something coming from um, Ma'am Socorro Parco while Dr. Ben was in the middle of his presentation. She was asking something like, are the choices freely done? Has this been answered, Ma'am Parco? Otherwise, do you wish this question to be addressed now by Dr. Ben Malayang? Ma'am Socorro Parco? Well, I believe the question has been done already, has been addressed already, while the talk of Dr. Ben Malayang III was in progress. Okay, how about the others? Our distinguished participants, guests to this hybrid panel discussion and webinar, web shop, right shop. Okay, is there anyone among you who wishes to ask something? Yes, Ma'am Socorro Parco. Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Hi, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Go
Good
ahead, ma'am.
afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I don't know if this is like in Facebook, it's false, but we hear of some people who are still coerced into voting yes to 174 reclamation. So that is related to my question. Are the choices freely done?
So, Dr. Ben, sir?
Well, the examples that I was trying to make was what should be the framework for doing a formal process of making decisions about options of addressing environmental issues, or perhaps even social and economic issues like we need to do something with what we have in our community in order to address unemployment. So they are linking, of course, an environmental project such as reclamation to a need in the community, or at least what is perceived need of the community, which is for employment. There are many things not clear about the matter, like exactly what kind of employment would be needed by the people in Dumaguete, given the competencies that are available with us, as against what kind of employment would be offered by the solution, the offered solution of a reclamation. But the matter of making the decision on this is what should be the decision at the formal level of decision making with respect to what should be done. So obviously, Ma'am Parco was referring to the fact that there is an effort to do extra formal ways of soliciting political support for one option of the solution, which is to have the reclamation, while at the same time forgetting that really the real process should be as to how the council of the city should preside over the engagement of everybody in the community to make meaningful, fair contribution to the discussion on what would be the options available to Dumaguete. So these are the things that the one that I was proposing here is the framework for making the formal processes of decision making rather than the non-formal and merely political. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ben, for that. And I hope, Ma'am Socorro, your question has been addressed. Now, before we entertain the next question, we have just a follow-up question, I suppose, from Sir Jutes DC Pamate. Mayor Ipe mentioned a possibility of calling for a referendum. What is your take on this, sir? I believe this is also addressed to you, Dr. Ben.
Yeah, the referendum has been offered as an option, but at the same time, it must be taken again in the sense of what is the formal process of making this decision, as against merely a political process of making the decision. Political in the sense of say, getting as many people to support you. A referendum requires that everybody involved in the referendum are well aware of the issues that are to be referendumed. But if they're in the absence of any information about the project and good studies on how the project will turn out to be as good as it has been intended to be, a referendum would not be meaningful, but rather would just simply be a vote of confidence on whoever is saying one position or the other. So it is really, that's one. And then second option, of course, that it is not called for in the processes that are actually embedded in the processes and ordinances of the city. The city said that when making decisions of projects like this, the council should have had a public consultation. There is no mention of referendum, because a referendum is merely counting the numbers of hands that are raised, rather than a meaningful, fair discussion of the options at hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Dr. Ben, for that. Well, if there's anything that Dr. Emmanuel and Dr. Antonio also would like to say, to add on to what was mentioned by Sir Ben, you are please free to do so, ma'am, sir. If there would be none, there is this next question coming from Erwin Arapol, from the Physical Therapy Department. Is there a known environmentally sound method of protecting our coastline from erosion? Dr. Ben, or any among our resource persons?
Well,
Let's start with Dr. Ben.
As I said, when you make any solution, offer a solution, there's always a good, the bad, and the ugly part. And it's a question of balancing how much of the good, how much of the bad, and how much of the ugly one could accept in order to solve the emotional problem. And for many people, indeed, coastal protection is a very legitimate issue, and that's been done. And so I do not disagree that some coastal protection has to be done. But again, if you are to do coastal protection, which is something that is very emotional to many people living in the coastal areas, you have to do this with the view that you want to create the most good from what you want to do at the least costs and bad and uglies to the people and the environment that will be affected. Ang problema sa atong position about sa 174, the main issue is we do not see anything that would compensate sufficiently the burying of almost 100 hectares of coral reefs, seagrasses, and beds that are protecting as well as creating livelihoods for many many people in the city, including regulating actually the coastal systems of our city. So if you alter this, please let us know to what extent the costs would be overwhelmed by the benefits. So if we are still talking of benefits that are more imagined than factual, in the face of harms that are more factual than imagined, there is no basis for saying it's justifiable to accept the solution of reclamation. So it's a balancing act. Thank you.
So it's a matter of balancing between the good and the bad and all, right? So it really requires a lot of good discernment on our part, on our leaders' part. Would Dr. Jorge Emmanuel like to say, to respond also to the question, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I appreciate Dr. Ben's matrix. I think it's extremely helpful. I'd just like to supplement what he said in that with regards to shoreline protection, there's not only one way of doing it. There are actually many ways of doing it. There are soft methods, there are natural methods. For example, we know that the planting of mangroves is one way of being able to protect our coastlines. Another thing we have to consider in the longer term, which is the difficult, emphasizes the emotional issue, is that we expect sea level rise. The shoreline protection, for example, that was done in the first reclamation, the small reclamation, pretty much maintains, is based on the assumption that the sea level is not rising. We need to take into account that in about 30 years, so much higher level will be expected of the seas, and therefore we need to take that into account. And one of the things we have to consider is a transition of moving communities away and relocating them to areas for which they would be more resilient, I mean, away from being in vulnerable areas. And I also wanted to add that the one recommendation of this reclamation is really a hard engineering type of structure for shoreline protection. As I mentioned, there are other ways, but when you consider that, you also have to consider the other impacts of it. So you could protect using hard engineering revetments and so on the coast, but you would cause scouring and accretion in other parts of the coast. You would cause flooding. And you have to keep in mind that the amount of stones, for example, that will have to be used to build that shoreline protection will come from somewhere. And that is another potential ecological disaster, because I understand EM Cuerpo is thinking of taking it from our river, one river in particular, from the Ocoy River. What will be the environmental impact of taking so much rocks and stones from there to build the shoreline protection? Finally, I'll just add one more thing on the issue of the 174 hectare. I've been looking at other examples in other countries that were also done by the Chinese. As you know, it's primarily Polychangda Corporation, a Chinese state-owned enterprise that will do the work if it's approved. And looking at the experience, I've looked, for example, at Sri Lanka. And after doing similar calculations, the amount of dredge material, dredge fill, that will be required to create the 174 hectare islands will be from, if my calculations are correct, from about 2,000 hectares of seabed. And that seabed is typically within 25 kilometers of where the reclamation would be, which is basically in the Tanyan Straits or in the close to the Apo Island protected area, because there's a limitation to the depth and how far these dredge materials have to be taken using the trailer suction hopper type of dredgers that the Chinese use, or even the other types. In either of the two methods, they will destroy a huge amount of seabed, which is yet, in fact, my calculation is about the seabed area that will be destroyed will be about 60% of the area of Dumaguete. So we're not only talking about the 174 hectares that will be buried under all this soil. We have to think of the massive destruction of the seabeds from which all this sand, silt, and gravel will be taken, which is basically from our seabed. So these are all the considerations we have to take into account.
Thank you, Dr. Jorge. Would Dr. Hope Antoni like to add something to that, ma'am? You're on mute, ma'am. Sorry. That's fine, ma'am. All right.
Oh, I want to answer one question that just got posted. I think it's
Yes, ma'am.
by Maria Teresa Belsinia.
Yes, ma'am.
Nursing.
From the College of Nursing.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I salute both Dr. Ben and Dr. Jorge for the expertise in environmental issues. So I'll focus on how to embed this in the curriculum.
Yes,
especially because mention is made of the 3 key concepts that I shared on what is whole person education. So I'd like to say that, simply put, when we say whole person education, we want to promote the interconnectedness of the being of the students, to the self, to others, to God, a higher supreme being, a higher meaning and purpose in life. And that includes the environment, the nature, ecology. And so I agree with this question that instead of looking at that, what seems to be very abstract, I think to really boil it down for each of you doing your own course related to your field or discipline, to focus on the question of how is your course connected to environment or ecology, and how will your course contribute towards the protection, the defense, and the care for the environment, the ecology. So it is really that, and so it doesn't matter whether you're in nursing, in business, in architecture, in engineering. What is your contribution towards that? And of course, you can further focus on the reclamation because that is the very hot issue right now. So I think that's the simple thing, simple answer I can give.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir,
May I
Dr.
add to
Ben.
that a bit?
Yes, Dr. Ben.
That's well taken, the one that Dr. Hope was just mentioning. But if you look at the question of that we have this from Roy,
Miss Marie, from Roy.
No, from
Okay, sir.
from Professor De Leon.
Yes, sir.
It also means, I think, that from out of that question, it suggests that while we will focus our curricular content on something related to justice or environment and environmental justice, we might also need to consider that there are many dimensions to addressing these issues on environment. And therefore, consider the possibility of other aspects of the university's expertise coming together to reinforce your thematic focus and your disciplinary focus. So if there's nursing, for example, you want to incorporate the whole notion of environmental drivers of pandemics, the environmental solutions to reducing threats from pandemics. Maybe there are also other things that, from the perspective of the other disciplines in the university, might contribute as well to the richness of the course in and otherwise nursing course, but enriched by some inputs coming from law, coming from College of Divinity, Divinity School, and from the engineering and all other parts of the university. So it's really a challenge of expanding the dimensions of your focal interest, disciplinary interest, but at the same time expanding the degree by which other relevant disciplines in the university can contribute to your course. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ben. All right, those questions coming from Sir Jude, Sir Roy Olson have been answered, I suppose. We have one more question coming from Doc Wilma Tejero. Zero waste objective may not be attainable because everyday economy produces goods and services, and people demand and consume the same. Rather reduced GHG emissions. Where did it go? And eventually attain carbon neutrality on campus. Locality is a more attainable objective, or do we have an operational definition of zero waste from SU experts' perspective?
Well,
Sorry.
thanks to Wawi for that question. The Zero Waste International Alliance, and I think also the Zero Waste Business Alliance, these are international bodies that have been dealing with zero waste, have decided to put sort of a practical goal that is even now attainable, but keeping in mind that zero waste is a vision and a goal that we may not achieve in our generation, because it is part of a circular economy concept that will have to look at how we produce things, how we extract things, how we design our products, how we design our packaging in a way that eventually we limit the amount of waste eventually to zero. However, for practical purposes, the Zero Waste International Alliance has defined that if we can reduce our residual waste to 10% or less of the total waste, that those cities, those businesses, those institutions can then be certified as being zero waste for the time being. In other words, it's moving in the zero waste direction, but they have achieved one important timeline for now, which is 10% or less of your total waste, which means that 90% or more of your waste is either being recycled or composted. And the way to really achieve that is by making sure that you have reduced your residual waste as low as possible. And so there are many zero waste cities in the world today, in Europe, in Buenos Aires, Vancouver. San Francisco was hoping to become a zero waste city by 2020, but it didn't quite meet the goal, and it might take a few extra years. But these are based on the 10% criteria for now. So that's a practical aspect of it, because for us to really achieve zero waste or close to it, it's really a vision that requires us to rethink our entire economic system towards a circular economy rather than a linear economy. There's a lot of papers about this, and I urge you to read as much as you can about all the different concepts of zero waste and how we hope to get there in hopefully in a generation or two.
Thank you, sir, for that. Just before we entertain one or two more questions, earlier on I announced that we may not have all the luxury of time to entertain all questions because we are anticipating a very engaging discussion in the different breakout rooms in a while. But just before we entertain one or two more questions, I think there is one comment from Dr. Walden Ursus that I think that should get our attention. He's making mention about something like this. I think the proponents of this 174 hectare reclamation project are mostly Sillimanians, are now our leaders. And I think he's trying to invite them to enroll back to Silliman and take courses on whole person education. Right. Thank you, Dr. Walden, for that. Okay. So I don't know if there are more questions coming in. From Doc Bridget Villardon, I agree with Dr. Ben Malayang's thought on the integration of environmental issues in our curriculum. That's precisely the reason why the GE10 whole person education is thought by their own college or unit or department, so that you can translate it to your own disciplines in terms of your approach, strategies, and solutions. That's going to be one of the topics of discussion in the breakout rooms in a while. All right. Are there any more questions before we go to the breakout rooms? I think we're in time, 5 minutes more before we launch the breakout rooms. And if there are no more questions or comments, I think this is something that we should not fail to do while everybody is still here, while our 3 resource persons are still here. May I invite everybody to switch on their cameras if they can for this photo op. So this is a very good, documentation. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity, a rare opportunity for all of us to be gathering here for this particular topic of discussion. All right, so I'll volunteer to take the photos myself. All right, so there are 4 frames, and you won't know where you are in my frame, so keep smiling all throughout. Here we go with the first photo. Ready? Smile. One more. All right, one more. We'll go to the next frame. Keep smiling. Again, ready. Next frame. Keep smiling. And one more. All right. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to thank once again Dr. Ben Malayang III, Dr. Jorge Emmanuel, and of course, Dr. Hope Antoni for their time this afternoon. Shall we give them our collective virtual applause? And they even deserve our tada reaction. There you go. Thank you very much, sirs and ma'am. We will now request our technical team. Thank you, sirs and ma'am. our technical team from Seoul to launch the breakout rooms where our participants will have the opportunity to brainstorm among themselves on how they can further streamline and implement whole person education into their curricula or their syllabi. Okay, may I now turn you over to your breakout rooms, to your breakout room moderators for group one, breakout room one, the arts and sciences, the computer studies group. We have Miss Joy D. Ma'am Joy, take your group away. For the breakout room two, engineering and design, Mascom, IEMS, SPAG, and COPVA. We have Ma'am Jean H. Hinove. Ma'am Jean, take your group away. For breakout room number three, we have groups coming from ICLS, nursing, IRS, medicine, and pharmacy. Ma'am Gemma Kitani is your moderator. Hey, ma'am, take your group away. And for breakout room number four, these are groups coming from business administration, divinity, agriculture, and education. Mr. Christian Rivera, your group, sir. Okay, so we will now request our Seoul personnel to launch the breakout rooms. And we will back shortly before, or shall we say after 20 minutes, here in the main room for the consolidation of reports. Thank you. And that's via the chat box. And good afternoon again, and we're all back to the main room. We were eavesdropping from one breakout room to another, and we were really experiencing high level of matter loading and high level of inspiration we were getting from the discussion. Okay, early on I was talking to Ma'am Biola here in the main room, and we're all back here already. Now, before we give the virtual floor to our different moderators who will give a synthesis of a maximum of 2 minutes, please, moderators. We will first launch the link to the evaluation of this hybrid panel discussion. In the interest of serving Silliman community better, we enjoin you to this evaluation tool, to this evaluation activity. This really matters to us, your honest evaluation to the program, to this experience today. Again, in the interest of improving our way of serving you, Silliman community. The Office of Instruction, the College of Education, Center for Education, Excellence in Learning, Teaching, and Assessment, and of course, SOL, or Silliman Online University Learning. So please, if you now see in the chat box the access to the evaluation, kindly start evaluating now this training. And meanwhile, while you are doing that, I now would like to give the floor to our different moderators, again, who will give their synthesis. Let's start with moderator from group number one, Ma'am Joy D. Ma'am Joy, ready to take the virtual floor, ma'am? Please do so.
Okay, thank you, Sir Kabali. I hope I'll be able to synthesize properly the discussion that we had. We had a very enriching discussion with those in breakout room one, and we even divert na migbalik sa plenary. So we're not able to really like, because we ran out of time. That's how interesting and very enriching was the discussion in breakout room one. Now, I hope I'll be able to like fully synthesize what they had shared to me. So for question number one, which is asking them to enumerate specific environment-related topics that may be incorporated in their WPA syllabus. I think all of them shared the emphasis on that. The topics that should be incorporated should be aligned to their respective fields, because we need to go back to what our specific field is, and then we have to like choose or like select an environmental topic that would somehow add knowledge to the students. It is like a partner of what their field is. So for example, with SPAG, they would look more into environmental justice. So that is an example for the alignment of an environmental topic with a specific department or the field. From CAS, of course, the College of Arts and Sciences, they have a diverse discipline, so they share the same thing. Environmental topic should also be aligned with their respective field, and also to include topics on environmental health and values formation that would somehow contribute to our environment. So it's not only enough that we aside, because values formation supposedly should be done in the lower levels, but as what we can see with our students nowadays, even the simple um, knowledge of teaching them how to properly throw their trash, those aspects should also be included. So that's it for number one. And then for number two, where in with regards to our existing whole person education course, which specific section in the syllabus can we integrate environmental topics? Now, the in WPE, we do have a discussion about 5C. So among the 5Cs, the best section where environmental topics aligned to the different fields could be integrated will be under community. So this is where we immerse our students with the community. We teach them the significance of the community in Silliman's 5C. So this is a very appropriate section where we could inject or add up the environmental topics that we could identify in relation to our respective fields. Now for number three, what do you think would be a practical and doable student online activity? The following are activities that they did identify. Students could like tie up with an LGU or a community, and then they could do like video, virtual like ads, or they could also like do campaigns, write a paper about the current issues or about the environment. Then for the case of SPAG, they have cases, they ask their students to create videos that is both videos about the environment or about this one, then sharing as well. So there was also another contribution from Ma'am Feby that gender role also is very important in protecting the environment. So they would ask their students to like write a paper about it. So that could be another activity. And of course, a digital or web journal. That would somehow be a platform for the students, especially with the pandemic that we are in right now, and ODL that we are using as a teaching pedagogy. A digital web journal is where the students would somehow place everything from the involvement in the different activities and the reflection to these activities. Now for number four, how do you think should the student activity in the dimensions of faith, instruction, research extension be assessed? First, PAG, they do make use of cases. They ask their students to create videos, of course, centered around environmental justice. And then the students would share what their knowledge or the knowledge they have gained all throughout the experience. And at the same time, the adapted community or the LGU or where these topics are being applied to would also rate the video. And then also reflections, of course, it's very important to really immerse the student, though we could not do face-to-face immersion nowadays, but virtual immersions could be done, especially that Silliman University is very diverse. And it's better that, for example, we not only focus within our, because environment is, of course, affecting all of us. So we could tie up with the other fields or other units. So we could make it an interdisciplinary immersion. And after the immersion, students should reflect what they have learned. But of course, we have to make sure that the activities and the assessments are always aligned with the university's vision, mission, so the VMGO, as well as the program outcomes and the graduate outcomes of our students. So I think that's all from my
Thank,
end, Sir Caballo,
thank
because
you very
we
much.
didn't yet run out of time.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very
So
much, Ma'am Joy. We do have limited of time as well to do this, so let's be quick. We'll move right away to group two, breakout group number two. Ma'am Jean Henove reporting for the group. Before that, may I remind again everybody, please participate in the ongoing evaluation via the access, the link in the chat box below. Thank you very much again, Ma'am Joy. Ma'am Jean?
Okay, good afternoon. We had a very engaging and interesting discussion with a group from engineering, architecture, mass comm, and COPVA. What a mix of disciplines, no? So
Yes.
from the engineering side, it was interesting though because they really identified topics that can be taught. Take for example, when they teach about environment ethics, they teach about earth appreciation, they teach about energy conservation. So these are very specific topics identified that can really reinforce the topic discussed this afternoon. So on the issue of how they are going to teach it, particularly for MASCOM, though they are thinking of sharing about awareness, environmental awareness, as well as COPVA, through their art, they can share and they can advocate for the topic at hand. With the issue on how to teach students what online activities they could do, it was a good discussion on particularly ethics. The students are given situations when they are asked to choose between right and wrong. Another could be particularly for architecture, they can apply what they have learned in the concepts through their architecture projects. Another issue was also on probably thinking about what can be incorporated in their topic on volunteerism, as well as looking also in the, according to Ma'am Salem, look into the how the persons with disabilities are also affected in this case. Same as true with MASCOM, they can go as MASCOM and COPVA, they can also advocate, they can do environmental communications in their field. So that's it for group 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Jean, for that. Okay. Now reporting for group three is Sir, I think they have appointed somebody. I have read it somewhere. Sir Leo, is it? Sir Leo?
Yes,
Sir
sir.
Leo Cinco, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ma'am Gemma. Hey. Sir Leo, take it away, sir.
So good afternoon, moms and sirs. So I'll be reporting the ideas and the discussion headed by the Allied Health Sciences. So for question number one, I think we all agreed that it should be patterned to our specific profession or specific courses. So as pointed out by Ma'am Tess Ginoo from the College of Nursing, one issue that we can address is the health disparities so that we can achieve environmental strategy and also how we will be able to use it. And also there should always be a collaboration with the people and also the environment. For the PP department, they already integrate or enhance the discussion of zero waste management of Silliman University as part of their GE10 curriculum, which focuses on promoting the prohibited use of plastics and other materials. And also segregation is also an important factor to consider when discussing about environmental issues. And also there are already units such as the biology department and the medicine, they already integrate environmental policies and health issues to their respective curriculum. For question number two, it has been suggested that we incorporate environmental policies and issues in the section 4 and 5 of the whole person education syllabus. And also in order to enhance participation of students, maybe we can incorporate some open forum or discussions or reflection paper as part of assessment. And also, Ma'am Waddington pointed out that there should always be balance when making these topics, they should always be balanced between knowledge and action or doing. For question number 3, what we can do is to promote information drive. There are some specific activities that they have presented, such as 5-day consume local produce only challenge, and an online debate can also be one engaging factor or activity to consider. 1-day zero waste challenge, and there are, but on top of this, there should always be that Silliman branding in order for this information to be well disseminated and valued. And sad to see, for question number 4, we weren't able to discuss this due to the lack of time. Okay, we given limited time, and the discussion was so intensive, so we're not able to answer question number 4. That's all for our discussion.
Thank you very much, Sir Leo. I like what he said, Silliman branding, all right? Now we give the floor to breakout room facilitator, number 4 moderator, rather, sorry, Sir Christian Rivera. Sir?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Sir Ren. Thank you for the opportunity. So in our group, we were mixed with, I would have to say, intellectual giants as well, from the College of Business Administration, the Divinity School, the College of Agriculture, and the College of Education. While listening to all of them speak and provide their inputs, it was really overwhelming. We could actually see that indeed, not only are they doing the part, meaning they're not only talking about it, but they're doing it. They are already ready with their corresponding syllabus. We had sharings coming from the different deans when they portrayed and showed their respective syllabus already incorporating how the respective colleges play a crucial role in addressing the needs not only of the local but inclusive of the global events, particularly in their respective specializations. Most of the comments coming from Doc Gina and as well as Dr. Cubello was also speaking about getting the students involved, taking into consideration the student government, trying to make them participative in constructing how we could enrich our own syllabus, because our students, as stated by Doc Gina, already have that deep sense of interest. Doc Cobello also further stated that there is already that sense of general knowledge about the environment and awareness and attitude towards what they should be doing as part of professionals or graduates of our Silliman University. So there was a quick recap on how we could structure our syllabus, taking first what Sir Leo said, the Silliman branding, how Silliman University can enrich the person, how the heritage, how the culture, and what a true Sillimanian is before translating into the various whole person education as like what Dr. Tejero said, enriching in terms of the theories, the technical theories based on all of our specialized programs. So we have there the inventory, trying to make certain that we are accountable for each action despite the true presence of consumption. And when we say consumption, for example, there is that speaking of consumer analysis, trying to figure out inventory and analysis on how we consume products, how we affect the environment, and what can we do as a person with rational thinking and conscience, not only for our environment, but also conscience for everyone around us, because we have to know and understand what the university is, not only as an image, not only as an institution, but deeply showing us what we are working together, faculty, staff, students, and leaders of our respective university. So the trends and interests were all taken into consideration. We had some outlooks for capstones, for research topics that may be done by the students to get their hands on into the situation and really deliver the true essence of what we want from the whole person education. And I do believe that most of my colleagues in that room are also looking forward to the next set of talks in order to further bring about what the 3 giants or the intellectual giants have already shared earlier in terms of their discussions. So I hope I was able to articulate the thoughts coming from room 4. Sir Ren, back to you.
Thank you very much, Sir Christian Rivera. And we would like to congratulate and thank all our participants for all those brilliant ideas now awaiting execution or implementation as we anticipate as we have already opened rather a brand new school year in this new normal of teaching and learning. Okay, and again, I'd like to thank our moderators, Dean Joy D for Breakout Room 1, Ma'am Jean Hinove for Breakout Room 2, Ma'am Gemma Kitane for Breakout Room 3, and of course, Christian Rivera for Breakout Room 4. Now, I hope that by this time, everybody has already filled out and submitted the evaluation form. Otherwise, you may still do that in the next few minutes. Meanwhile, I'd like to bring you back Dr. Beulah Rose R. Torres, Director of the Office of Instruction. Ma'am.
Ladies and gentlemen, after God created the earth, Genesis chapter 1 recorded that God rated his marvelous handiwork good. In fact, he graded it good 6 times in a row. However, after God formed man in their image on the 6th day, his general rating became very good. The question is, after billions of years of man's ingenuity, would God's overall rating remain very good? My answer is no, and perhaps your answer is no as well. The next question is, can the faculty of Silliman University do something to mitigate total environmental destruction brought about by man's carelessness? The panel discussion and write shop today showed, oh yes, we could. And where? In our very own virtual classroom. The time is now. The time is this semester. Before it's too late, let's prove to the world that together with our students, we care for the environment. Thank you for your participation in this event today. Godspeed and stay safe.